Hello everyone, it's Boba. I'm finally starting my journey of rewriting FNAF. I have two videos planned, Keeping It Classic and a FNAF Reboot. Today we're just going to do Keeping It Classic, and this is just a rewrite of the FNAF lore with minimal gameplay changes. I do want to say that I understand why FNAF is kind of a hot mess when it comes to the storyline. Scott Cawthon never expected FNAF to become this great gaming phenomenon. No one else thought it would become the franchise it is today, so a long, lengthy storyline was not exactly constructed for the first few games. Ultimately, I think Scott did amazingly well putting the story together piece by piece as he realized this franchise was thriving. Yes, there were retcons, but he was doing his best, so there's no hate on my end. I just like doing some creative writing for the franchise that sparked my imagination when I was in high school. Now, before we begin, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. This really helps out the channel, especially considering our goal is 500 subs. Let's grab our tea and begin, shall we? Tackling rewriting the FNAF franchise has always been a bit overwhelming when you keep in mind all of the games. So, I first want to discuss how I'm going to be handling such a daunting task. First of all, I specifically see two eras of FNAF games. Era 1 is FNAF 1 all the way up to Ultimate Custom Night. Era 2 is Help Wanted and After. Now I will exclude FNAF World from Era 1 as this game really stands on its own and doesn't really fit into the whole story. When it comes to games, I'm not going to remove the night-to-night gameplay, only add. Our player still sits for their 5 nights at FNAF 1 through 3, checks the halls in various locations in FNAF 4, and still has to wander around Sister Location. Main functions and features will remain the same. However, I'm going to be changing the order of the games, as well as shuffling some of these major events around. I have one mission: tell the story in a way that William Afton has a more prominent role. After all, he's the main cause of the problems, and he really just needs to be focused on more heavily. I want to see how the games take a toll on him, not having to guess what happened outside of the game itself. So, here's how I'd arrange the games. First, I'd pick Sister Location, then FNAF 2, then FNAF 4, FNAF 1, FNAF 3, Pizza Sim, and Ultimate Custom Night. Now, I hear the comment section freaking out saying, "This isn't the right order!" Yes, you're completely correct, it is not the correct order, but for this rewrite, it's going to make a lot more sense. Okay, so let's start off with Sister Location. In this game, we would play as a normal worker doing maintenance, just like in the original game. Instead of hand unit, I would want phone guy to talk to us in the beginning. He's probably 19 at this point and has only been with the company for maybe a year or two. As we go down, he starts to tell us rumors night by night. We learn that things have changed with Fredbear's Family Diner since William was bought out by Henry. Circus Baby's Pizza World has just opened because of that. Ultimately, phone guy can't believe that the boss actually had to give up his company. Now, Phone Guy does comment about how William is actually able to spend more time working on the new animatronics. And that's been for the best, because now they're really going beyond and becoming revolutionized. And this was only possible with Henry's successful marketing and money. He tells the player that they need to do maintenance each night because the animatronics are super sensitive and that's how they keep up their lifelike appearance. Now, when it comes to gameplay, nearly all of it's the same. I would just want to add a section where we interact with Baby to recalibrate her. I think she was highly underutilized in Sister Location. After every shift, we have a playable minigame where William's daughter is trying to find a way to Baby when Circus Baby's Pizza World is open. 5 nights she's thwarted by her father. Night 6, she dies because William didn't catch her in time. However, we don't realize it's William till after the 6th night when a newspaper is seen about a worker going missing and a tragic loss of William Afton's daughter. The newspaper is dated for 1983. Like in the original game, on night 6, our character dies by the scooper and the fun times escape. This allows us to get a more in-depth look about how William's daughter died, and it really starts to show the cracks for William, the immense guilt. For FNAF 2, we play as the security guard, same as normal. We still watch the cameras, flash the lights, use the mask, and wind the music box. These things just don't change. When we arrive, William Afton calls this time. He gives the normal Fazbear policy talk, but then eventually explains what our character is doing. We are here to manage the animatronic's restless behavior and keep people out of the establishment. Because, since the fun times, he's been tinkering with new ideas, for better or worse, attempting to make them safer, but ultimately it didn't always work. After each shift, we will once again have cutscenes of William taking his sons to work each day. This will ultimately replace FNAF 4's cutscenes, and will be where we see the Bite of 87 take place. The last scene will take place on day 5. It should be noted that the only part of the gameplay that would change is that I would want Golden Freddy to be seen hooked up on the wall and stored away as a suit. However, Golden Freddy will still show up slumped over in your office and attack you. Now, this addition allows for Golden Freddy to still bite the crying child. Now, the Bite of 87 happens because the older brother locks the younger brother in a storage room. William thinks the older brother has walked home with the younger brother since they don't live too far away. So he heads home, and eventually the older brother is still there and ends up harassing the little boy more by sticking him in Golden Freddy's mouth, and it slams shut and kills him. The older brother panics and goes home, not really sure what to do. The Bite of 87 becomes a hush-hush incident that isn't shared with the public, but becomes a rumor all around the establishments after this. After night 6, you are greeted with a cutscene where Afton comes up behind you and smacks you as hard as he can with a crowbar. You can hear him talking about how you didn't do your job keeping people out and now his kid is dead and it's your fault. This really is where the madness begins to consume William. For FNAF 4, in this game we actually play as William rather than the crying child. In his dreams he's being tortured by the twisted forms of characters he's created, being ultimately his feeling of guilt. Between each nightmare, a playable minigame within the FNAF 2 location will happen where you slowly watch as William descends into the madness from his grief. He becomes more and more out of touch with reality, settling into the stages of anger, sadness, and guilt. William is struggling and just can't break through it. The third minigame will actually have William losing his control when he sees Henry happily walking with his daughter. He waits till that evening, and before she can be taken home by her father, he takes the opportunity to lure her away. No direct answer what happens is stated, but in his nightmares, there are missing posters on the wall of a little girl with her face blurred out and covered in blood. As the minigame continues, more and more children go missing. There are people talking about what's happened, and all William does is walk in, listen to everybody, and then goes to the back room. By the last day, all that's shown is a newspaper talking about the company disbanding due to missing children and the tragic death of Charlie Emily. For FNAF 1, we play as Henry's friend in this game. We get a call from Henry on the first night, explaining that he needs us to find a rabbit suit. Something inside needs to be dismantled. On the nights after Henry's call, our coworkers leave notes. It goes from mentioning that this place was restarted thanks to William Afton and ultimately flopped again, but also that this place is just eerie. Then it becomes more and more dark with each night. They start to mention that they're seeing something on the screens, hearing movement in the backgrounds. The animatronics are hunting something down in there. We use posters in the original game to glean what has happened to the children, that they were ultimately stuffed in the animatronic suits and possessed them. Now in the cameras we can see movement in the background of the screens. We hear the wheezing, strangled laughter of a now spring-trapped William Afton. During the last shift, we look at the note and halfway through what the coworker wrote, the writing is jarred and falls off the page. Below it in a very clunky handwriting, it says, "It's me," with blood stained on the page. William Afton is never actually attacking the player in this game, but rather is just there to unnerve the player in the background. Now we know he's around. The story about how William died from FNAF 3 would actually be present here in between the shifts or in 8-bit minigames. In FNAF 3, we are just a regular security guard tasked with the unfortunate role of protecting the establishment and fragile props. The gameplay is once again the same, but as the night progresses, William begins to talk more and more about how he's lost everything: his business, his family, his home, his health, and his sanity. Charlie was ultimately the first moment of relief he's felt since all this misery began, and that became a drug for him. The dialogue ends up making the game more challenging because it can distract you from focusing on locations and block you from hearing his movements. Meanwhile, the spirits that jump out at you are attempting to scare you away. They whisper, "Run, run away. It's dangerous. Save me. Help us." And it hurts. They still make that loud, grating noise, but if you pay attention, you can still hear the words. They also, once again, mess up your camera and audio systems. Your character ends up dying in the fire at the end that's caused on the final night, and you end up seeing a newspaper about the fire consuming the horror attraction. Once again, if you brighten the newspaper just like in the original game, you can see that Springtrap has escaped. For Pizza Simulator, no game changes. Maybe just a little bit more lines for William, just talking about getting some satisfaction to kill again when he gets his hands on you, or commenting you were just as easy to kill as Charlie. The game finally comes full circle, bringing back characters like Molten Freddy, Circus Baby, William, and Charlie. Molten Freddy wants to punish William for all the horrible things the Funtime animatronics went through. Circus Baby just wants to see her father and make him proud again. William is there to cause havoc, and Charlie is there to prevent William from hurting more people. Ultimately, their spirits are released, and this is where the major story ends. Now, Ultimate Custom Night is the ending that satisfies everybody in the sense that we finally get to see the horrible man who we've known this whole time get tortured for an eternity for the atrocities he's committed. So no game change there. Now, I do like the flow of the story compared to the original. It's a bit boiled down, but it has mostly clean-cut events that allow for the minigames to either be saved, adapted, or simply add more to it. I still think the games could be released in the chaotic fashion they were originally released in, and the story wouldn't get messed up too much. Like I said, I didn't want to change the gameplay too much. My goal was just to add a little bit of things or move them around. The time in between shifts was incredibly important to help flesh out that story. Minigames and posters are also crucial in helping piece things together. These features are ultimately what drew me to liking FNAF in the first place, piecing things together. Yes, my version would not have as much of that delightful sleuthing that FNAF fans drool over, but then again, with the right group of writers, you could very well figure out how to make this information more difficult to find, making it interesting and really having to cause you to figure out where all these secrets are. Ultimately, all I've done is create a rough draft, the skeleton, if you will, of a more consistent and less convoluted timeline. Honestly, the books weren't particularly helpful for this rewrite when it came to events, yet they did provide me with a better feel for how the games could be handled. Actually, in the next video I do of FNAF, I will actually be leaning more heavily into some aspects of the book that were just not really addressed at all and could have made for some excellent gameplay points. Well, I have to say this has been fairly challenging, but an enjoyable experience. I now have a better idea of things in general that I want to do for this reboot that I'm working on for FNAF Era 1. So don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss out on upcoming content, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye!
So catch me if I fall.